So with that, I'm really excited to introduce Eboni Adams-Monk. Eboni is someone I actually met at a after work session where it was actually a number of us that we were telling our stories. And it was a little contest of who had the best story, and Eboni actually won that contest as far as having basically being the best storyteller and telling her story and background. And when I found out Eboni was a chemical engineer by training, and was able to tell one of the best stories in this large group, I was like, I got to get to know Eboni. And I've now heard and seen her talk a couple times, and it's just she's a very good storyteller. So I'm really excited to have her here. So she did get her bachelor's in chemical engineering from the University of Illinois, Chicago. After working, I guess, a brief time in chemical engineering, she decided to get her MBA and went to Georgia State University to get her MBA. And she's currently a director of marketing at W.R. Grace. And if any of you all, if you don't know W.R. Grace, they are one of the leading companies, one of the leading STEM companies, and specifically on chemical manufacturing companies, in the world. So, to be a director there is very kudos to Eboni. But in addition to her work in the technical field, and now marketing in the technical field, she's also been studying the leadership and culture and spiritual happenings of corporate leaders, and how do we all become better leaders. So she really is a transformational corporate leader, but also a thought leader and an author. She has an upcoming book out, so hopefully she'll tell us a little about the book that's coming out. But again, we're really excited to have Eboni, and with that, I'll turn it over to Eboni.
Thanks, Lynn. Thanks for that introduction. And I want to just extend another welcome to everyone. I appreciate you all taking the time to be with us today and to listen to my story. It means a lot. So what are we going to do today? So if we were in the room together, I'd ask a lot of questions and I'd really engage you guys and get you involved. So as Lynn mentioned, we have the chat. I'll try to include as much engagement in this activity as I can today. I want to share with you my story. Lynn asked me to talk about my story and to talk about my book. And so I want to share that with you and talk about wisdom leadership, what it is, why it's important. And for you in your, at this stage of your careers, because you've actually begun your career already, the challenges for you as future leaders and how you can prepare for those challenges. And then at the end, I'll go over some resources, and then we'll definitely open up for questions and answers. By the end of this talk, I really want you to understand how you can prepare for leadership now. So I want you to begin to think about what leadership is. And if you want to put that in the chat, what you think leadership is, or when you think of leadership, what that means to you, go ahead and type that in the chat. Lynn, I can't see the chat because I'm sharing the presentation. So if there's anything that you get, just jump in and let me know. But I want you guys to think about leadership. And I want to start with this quote here about wisdom leadership. And I'll just give you a moment to digest this. Right? What is leadership? Wisdom leadership, right? I define it as this act of guiding a group of people from a place of service, utilizing information and knowledge and traditions from cultures that have been around for quite a long time. And when I say traditional cultures, I mean indigenous cultures, cultures that are found all around the world and in our communities, and cultures all around that possess this kind of ancient knowledge, proverbs, right? Those are the traditional cultures, right? Those beginning cultures that I'm speaking of. And when we think about wisdom traditions and preparing to lead, and I was thinking about this, and I really started to think about how is leadership different, right? How we typically think about leadership. How is it different from wisdom leadership? I was just online before this meeting, and I came across a quote from an elder from West Africa. So Bonfu Somé, she has books out. She's passed away a few years now, but I found a quote of hers where she wrote, "There is a deep longing among people in the West to connect with something bigger." And it's part of a quote, but it made me think about how leadership has transformed over a period of time. When I was in college a long time ago, right, and we thought about leadership, we thought about it in certain terms. And when I think about it now, this concept of wisdom leadership is a good complement to the technical training that you're getting now. So let's dig into this for a moment. Were there any comments about what leadership is, Lynn?
Not yet.
Okay.
Please,
Okay.
please, people can add to the chat. You can either do it public or do it private to me.
Yep. So I want to go on here and talk about why, right? Why wisdom cultures? Why? And in wisdom traditions, if I can refer to it as that, our journey and our story becomes very important. And as Lynn said, when we first met, she was drawn to my story and the things that I talked about. And this is particularly important in the context of being future leaders, because in order for us to be leaders, we have to be very self-aware, which means we have to understand our story. We have to understand our value and what we offer. And our own individual journeys and our stories are clues about who we are and what we want to learn. So let me take you on a little bit of a journey through my leadership journey. When I was young, so you can see me there with my cornrow braids there on the top left. When I was young, I remember liking the arts and sciences. I danced, so I loved that part of culture and the arts, but I was also very good in math and science. In fact, my mother tells me, and my old teachers tell me stories about how when I was in first grade, some of my classmates weren't understanding the concept that the teacher was teaching about. I don't even remember what the concept was. And I went to the front of the class and I began to teach the class in terms that they could understand to help them get this, right? Talk about natural born leader, right? I hear this story all the time. And so over the years, what I recognized was that I had this strong technical capability, math and science. I actually loved differential equations. People, my friends around me who weren't in engineering school thought I was absolutely crazy. But over the years, I also noticed that to complement that technical knowledge and information and love and that passion was also a passion to learn about my culture. I am African-American woman. My family was born here, but I can trace my lineage back to Nigeria and to Cameroon, to the Bamileke and the Yoruba nations that live there. And a lot of this yearning, it started when I was younger, but it intensified when I went to college. And toward the end of those years in college is where a lot of this happened. So I missed a big step that I want to go back and make sure that I talk about. This love of science and math was something that the elders in my family, my mother, my aunts, picked up on very early. And when I was trying to decide what my career would be, this was when I was in high school, they said, you should be an engineer. My mother had done some research on engineers. We didn't have any engineers in the family, but she saw for students who love math and science, engineering was the way to go. So I spent my summers when I was in high school at the Illinois Institute of Technology, University in Chicago, and we did engineering projects, and it just stuck. So I made my way through college, joined corporate America, first generation engineer in my family, first generation employee in corporate America. Most of my family worked in the school system or for the government or the city. And so this was a big deal. And while this was happening, I was also learning with elders in Brazil, with elders in the Native American tradition here, and some elders who had studied in the traditional ways of some of the places in India. And also, my work took me all around the world: Italy, Spain, the Netherlands, Kuwait, Dubai, China. And what I noticed over a period of time was that a lot of the cultures that I was coming into contact with all shared a similar framework. And that framework is really the foundation for what I call wisdom leadership that I talk about in my book. And so along the way, I became a yoga teacher, and what this taught me, and also in corporate America, received lots of promotions. I have worked in a lot of different roles in my career. I started out as a chemical engineer, became a production supervisor, manager, working out on the production floor, actually standing side by side with the operators making the chemical products that we manufactured. I had a hand in quality. I was a technical superintendent in one of our facilities in Atlanta, Georgia for a while, where the engineers, the maintenance crew, as well as the quality labs, all the technical functions of a operations plant all reported into me. Then I decided that I wanted to make a switch and move more toward the business side. And so I've been a customer service manager of Six Sigma Black Belt, working on business process. I've been a sales operations manager. I feel like I'm leaving out a few roles here, right? And now I'm in marketing. What an interesting journey for me, starting as a chemical engineer and being able to make my way over to this side. It was quite a journey. And along the way, I learned a lot of lessons. And I learned a lot of lessons outside of work that I actually applied inside of work. And as a result of that, I've been able to transform my teams. The teams that I have led have produced record revenue growth for the company, have introduced lots of cost savings ideas, and have directly impacted the bottom line to the count of millions of dollars. And so this concept of balancing our life and the lessons that we learn from our cultures and for our life, for me, is not a trivial thing. For me, it is a direct reason why I've been as successful as I have. And this story really is about transformation. And that is the goal of Wisdom Traditions, is to transform people, to help them to live a life in a way that they feel good about and that they impact the community. So,
Ebony, we do have a number of great input on what they believe leadership is.
okay.
Would you like I could share that with you?
Yeah.
We have responsibility, inclusion, leading by example.
Those are great. I love those. I love those answers. Responsibility, inclusion, leading by example. And those are all characteristics of leaders, of good leaders, I would say, right? Impactful leaders. And those characteristics will also serve us well as we think about leading from here, from today, out into the future. So we're going to come back to those in a minute. And I thank everybody who shared.
We have several more.
Okay.
We have about 5. Another one was guiding people.
All right.
Another one was active taking a group of people together to meet a certain goal.
Yeah. Okay.
Leadership is helping a group meet a goal or achieve something.
Mm-hmm.
And leadership is helping others through setting an example.
That's great. That's great. Wisdom, leadership, and for leadership, right? The big question becomes, once we define what it is, the big question then becomes, well, how do we do it? Right. And so I can remember particularly when I was in getting my MBA, and people, if you ask them what is leadership, it was all about taking charge and, making sure the team met certain goals. And a lot of the conversation was more about results. and not a lot about the process of getting those results. And for me, that is what's important about what I share in my book. This is a copy of my book, Wisdom, Traditions, and the Essence of Leadership. And everything that I have learned, and you guys are already, thinking this way just based on your definitions of leadership, made me recognize that there's a need, an opportunity for me to share the things that I've learned. I went through that whole journey, and then I decided, how can I share this with people? Because people were asking me, how do you do this? We have no idea how you get these results. How were you so successful with this team? There was an employee perhaps that just wasn't performing very well, and everyone had tried to work with this person, and I came along, and then all of a sudden we started to see some improvement. And as I reflect back on my career and those questions, I thought, let me create a book to help other people think about how they can make a difference. This book is a book that I wrote thinking about current leaders in corporate America, maybe those who have been leading for quite a while, have lost that spark, or, we do a lot of leadership training in corporate America. And sometimes we forget. Sometimes we don't use the tools that we learn. And so this was really a book that I wrote to help people to find that spark again. And so what's interesting is that I'm able to share this with you today. You guys are getting a sneak peek for one, but also you're getting a bit of a head start, because the way that we're talking about leadership today is certainly not the way that we talked about leadership when I was in college, not even necessarily when I was getting my MBA, unless someone took a specific class about organizational behavior and those kinds of classes, where then you start to think about leadership skills and leadership styles. So a couple more proverbs about wisdom. Knowledge without wisdom is like water in the sand. So you're in school right now and you are learning a lot of knowledge, right? I'm sure you guys are like happy to have a bit of a break, right? From the facts and the formulas and the projects and all of that. And as scientists and engineers, we aren't necessarily trained to think about how we'll transform that knowledge, right? So wisdom asks, with all the knowledge that you're learning, what will you do with it? What will you do with it, right? Seek wisdom, not knowledge. Knowledge is of the past, wisdom is of the future, right? As the younger generation, I feel like we're passing the torch to you. You have an opportunity to use the knowledge that you're getting right now and advance it. And to me, that is the essence of leadership. How do you take something that already exists and transform it and improve it in a way so that not only that we can have a patent about it, right? But so that it actually helps people, whether it be our teams that we're working with at work or studying with in school, or whether it be the larger community out in society. So I'm just grounding you in some information around wisdom and why wisdom. So these are my principles of wisdom leadership: power, purpose, community, and tradition. And in the US, when we think of leadership, a lot of times we think of power. When a lot of people get into leadership positions, many times they move in a way that indicates that they have a significant amount of power. So I want to tell you guys a little bit of a story. When I was a new manager and engineer, I was charged with the responsibility to make sure that we made these specialty chemical products in a way that to make sure that we met the quality specs for the customer, to make sure we met those requirements, and to make sure that the integrity of the product was such that it would perform the way that it needed to. And it just so happened at this time I was working for a part of our business that manufactured aluminum can sealants. And so every day I would come to work, I was working in the manufacturing plant, and I would stand side by side with the operators who were producing those products. And one of the things to note was that I was younger than most of those people. Many of the operators had been working in that same plant for 20, 30 plus years. They knew more about the product and how it needed to be made, and how they could listen to the sound of the equipment and recognize that something was wrong, or that there was a lever, a button that needed to be switched in order to make sure that the equipment, that the products would be made to meet those specs. They knew when to shut the line down because something wasn't working quite right, and they didn't want to sacrifice the quality of the product. And so one of the things that I learned very early on in my career was to listen. As an engineer, would have been very easy for me to go into my office, do my mass flow balance calculations and all these things, and then come back out to the operators and tell them, do it this way. But the principles of wisdom leadership say, take a step back and think about how to listen to people. So those operators, even though they were older than me, and even though I was in the management position, I actually took the time to step back and learn from them. I let them teach me so that we could improve those process lines, improve the quality of the product together. And so when I think about what that means in these principles of wisdom leadership, you've probably digested some of these proverbs and quotes that are here, so I won't go through each one of them. But what is interesting is that if I step back and I think about what is the purpose of why I'm here in this position, why is it that Eboni, 25 years old, whatever it was, working out with operators who have been doing this for decades, why me? Why me? What was I there to learn, and what was I there to give, right? That's that element of purpose, morphing into community. How do I then work with the community, not just the community of engineers and managers, but the entire community, right? I would talk to the maintenance engineers in that plant, and I would ask them, tell me the history of this piece of equipment. And you would be surprised at how much useful information a single question could give me so that we could improve that line, so that we could satisfy the customer and improve our revenues at the same time because we make quality product, right? So you can see in that story, this concept of power not coming from a power position, but power being more subtle and more inclusive, purpose and evaluating why we're here and thinking about the community and tradition. Tell me about the histories. Tell me about the why. How did we get to this point? Those are the principles of wisdom leadership. And as future leaders, you are the future scientists, the researchers, the engineering managers, the CEOs. I implore you to let power evolve from a place of power. Take it from your head and think about how power would flow from your heart, how it will flow from your soul. That's really the principle of wisdom leadership. I got to take a pause and just take a deep breath after that, okay? All right, everybody take a deep breath. That's my yoga teacher and me coming out a little bit. So, how does this all work, right? That's all fine and good, but how does it work? So, I want you guys to take a look at me. I've shared a few different stories with you, and today I sit here, I'm a senior leader in my organization. My journey began in this, my work journey began in this chemical company. Initially, I worked for an Amoco chemical company, and then later moved to W.R. Grace. So I am those things, and I'm also a leader in a wisdom community. And what I didn't know is that when I graduated from college, when I began college, and when I graduated from college, I didn't know where the journey was going to take me. right? Many of you, you're working on your, heard about some of your projects at the beginning of this call, and they all sound fantastic. You all have your dreams and your thoughts about where you want to go, where you'd like to work, and what you'd like to do. But you really don't know where this journey is going to take you. And so over the years, I sit here before you smiling and telling you all about my journey and how successful I've been. But I also, over the years, struggled to find my right place in corporate America. So many times I was the only woman in the room. Sometimes I was the only Black person, only African American in the room. Sometimes I was the youngest person in the room. Sometimes the least experienced person in the room. When now I work in the corporate office, but before this I was working in Chicago, out in the field, and I had to relocate to a city where I didn't know anyone, no family, no friends, no one. My sons and I moved here because we knew there was opportunity here, but we didn't know what was going to happen once we got here. Along the way, you guys are so excited now, but along the way, I've been tired and frustrated and really unsure of myself at times. So think about, does any of that feel, do any of you feel that? Do you wonder about your future, where you're going? I'm sure with all the classes that you're going through, and some classes are harder than others. I was telling Lynn a story about organic chemistry and how it was definitely character building for sure. And so let me share just a little bit about what I learned, right? And hopefully you can take some of this for yourself. One of my teachers from Brazil, she told me, you learn by living. Because I would go to her all the time, right? Wanting advice and sometimes being frustrated, and sometimes just being very curious. And she said, my child, you learn by living. You learn by living. And I didn't know at the time. It actually frustrated me when she said that. But at the time, it was actually, now looking back, it was one of the best pieces of advice that I have received, because it taught me to be patient, and it taught me to observe what was happening within me as well as all around me. So all the hard work that you're going through in school, you're going through those challenges right now, I'm sure, alongside your successes, but the wisdom traditions teach us to learn from those experiences. When you think about your purpose, remember that was one of our principles, was purpose. I want you to look to your talents. I want you to look to your passions, and also to look to your challenges, because within those are clues and evidence of your purpose. Your talents, your passions, those are the things that help you to feel alive. They help you to find balance when you're frustrated or when you're working really hard and you need a break. Your challenges teach you to persevere, and also to help you rethink about your why. Why are you here? What are you doing? And why are you doing it? Your service becomes your connection to your community. Do you think about, how are you serving others? How do you intend to serve other people? And then finally, deep reflection, which we don't talk enough about. But there was a Forbes article in 2018 that mentioned that self-awareness is the most important capability that leaders need to develop. Self-awareness. And so deep reflection allows us to become self-aware. When you take a moment and pause and step back and take a look at where you are, what you're doing, you have an opportunity to let your thoughts slow down just a bit so that you can catch your breath. So you can think about and question your why. Your talents, understanding your passions and your challenges, those are all things that help this journey toward developing self-awareness. So it sounds like a very basic thing, right? Because I'm essentially saying, I want you to be mindful about your life, about your everyday. And that is exactly what I'm saying, because in that everyday, can be some extraordinary lessons that you can take not only for your life, for your work life as well, for your success at work. So I'm going to give you another opportunity to weigh in here. You know, when you think about being self-aware, one of the things, and as engineers, we're always thinking, scientists, we're always thinking about what's the problem? What's the problem we're trying to solve? What are the challenges, right? It fuels us. And so I want to understand a little bit about how you guys think about the challenges that you will experience as future leaders. So if you'd like to share in the chat, go ahead and give your thoughts about some challenges that you see for yourself or for your generation of future leaders. Because ultimately the question becomes, now that you have this roadmap for your journey, now that you take some time to step back and reflect, remember what wisdom is asking? Wisdom is asking, what do you do? What will you do? And that what will you do is likely linked to some of those challenges. You'll see some of the challenges that I found, obviously technology evolution, but there's some others here too that are quite interesting. I think we have some comments coming in, Lynn.
We got our first one, which is making change in the world.
Yep.
Another one is dealing with the need for addressing diverse cultures.
Mm-hmm. Those are good. Those are good. What I found to be very interesting when I looked at this list, and when we have a few others, you want to read those, Lynn?
Another one of competitive atmosphere, too much emphasis on independence rather than on teams.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Those are great. Those are great. So I did some research, right? Because I thought, what are some of the challenges for future leaders? And obviously, technology is evolving very quickly. In some ways, the current pandemic that we're in has really accelerated, in some ways, at least the ideas around technology and its place in our world. But it's very interesting that when I was doing this research, I didn't see a lot about technology evolution. It's big, right? There's a lot in that one bullet. But I found mostly everything else was about this idea of people and being self-aware. You know, how do you develop your employees and work with your team and inspire others? And how do you lead teams effectively and change? You know, we talk making change in the world, right? The change is happening around us. And then we're also challenging ourselves to also promote a certain amount of change. Diversity and inclusion, global community, those are front of mind right now with all of the issues around social justice and the protests after the George Floyd incident. And we could go on, right? Globally, there are a lot of issues and concerns related to diversity and inclusion. And when we think about our industries that we will work in, that we will contribute to, the challenge for us as leaders is how will we shape the change that needs to happen? When you take the time to reflect and observe and follow your passions, you develop a sense of self-awareness that will hopefully guide you to understand, first of all, identifying that there is something that needs to be improved and addressed here, but also how you do it. Many of us spend a lot of time working on our skill set, right? Becoming better engineers, you know, and sometimes in school, particularly in the undergraduate level, I wonder, are we spending enough time to really developing ourselves? so that we can handle people and the challenges that will face our teams. And once you graduate, you'll take your knowledge, and wisdom will ask, how will you use it? How will you serve others? Right? These are the challenges before us. So are you guys ready? Are you ready? Yes, no, maybe. So let me give you some tips. If you go and you Google, how to be a great leader, you'll find things like how to communicate, how to prioritize, how to lead a meeting, how to set SMART goals, all these different things. Sometimes though, the one of the things that helps us to really be successful is working on ourselves. And so that Forbes article about self-awareness in leadership becomes critical. So here are my tips for you. Devote some time for reflection. Think about what you're doing. Go out into nature. If you have hobbies, explore those hobbies, do them. Those are the things that will help you to kind of move back into yourself, if you will, and really think about what you're doing. It helps with your confidence. Reflection helps with your stress and your sense of clarity. And then ask yourself, what are your values? What's important to you? You're being self-aware, reflecting will help you to understand the things that are really important for you. What are your strengths? What are you good at? What do you like to do? And then all of you are within 4 or 5 years of graduating from college, depending on if you're in high school or in college now. Pretty soon you'll be thinking about how you're going to make money. Are you going to work for a company? You're going to start your own business. What companies are aligned with your purpose and values, right? What's the culture of the companies that you're thinking about? Because it is important. And when you know what your values are, it becomes easier for you to be a successful leader in a culture that fits you, that fits your values, that fits your leadership style. What skills do you need to improve? How can you be a better engineer? How can you be a better biologist? How can you be a better scientist? How can you be a better leader? I want you to honor where you are and also look for ways to transform yourself and others. Think about, we always talk about, when I was out in the field working in the production plant, looking at the lines, it was all about how do we get better? How do we get more throughput? How do we improve this process? The same thing applies to us. I always tell people to lead from where you are, which means you have to be getting better. Be adventurous, be curious, right? Don't be afraid to go out there and explore. Whatever is calling you, give it some time, give it some attention. I never knew that my passion for culture would lead me to 20 plus years later, write a book about culture. I never knew when I was exploring culture that I could use any of those lessons in my leadership. And then finally, the last two, build your network. You've got a small network here. You've got network of your peers. Begin to build your network. We talk about building your network before you need it. Talk to people, explore, be interested in what other people are doing. And then finally, observe other leaders. You'll see many examples of leadership. Take note of what you like and what you don't like. And don't be afraid to adjust your style accordingly. I want to make sure we have some time for questions. So as we wrap up today, I want to just give you a few more resources. So first of all, your life and your passions, I talked about that. But if you want to do some more study and research, I'm going to give you a couple of suggestions. So you'll see here 3 books. The first one is The Go-Giver Leader, which is actually a book about a person who's struggling to meet their goals and at work. And they meet a mentor who then tells them about these different laws of success. And so it's an interesting take on what I've said today. It's about how to it's about the more you give, the more you get. The more you serve your teams, the more you get back in return. So I thought that would be an interesting, book, kind of non-traditional book about leadership. Obviously, my book will be out in the fall. So that will be another resource. And then you also have a book called The Alchemist. And The Alchemist is not a leadership book. It is a book about self-discovery, and it's about the adventures along the way, just everyday life, and how our everyday situations can help to really shape who we are and mold who we are as people. I want to offer to you there's a group called Conscious Capitalism that I'm a part of. And what I like about that organization is that they look at leadership from a very balanced approach, where you're thinking about profits and results, and you're also thinking about the culture and the people. And then I offer to you, if you want to keep in touch with me, keep in touch with me as well. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, join my network. Right? And then, let's continue the conversation. I have wisdom communities on here because I can't really take full credit for what I've shared with you. It came from me observing the communities that I've been a part of. And I encourage you to start with your own lineage, right? What are your own family stories, right? What are your own inspirations that you're close to, right? Just with the people in your own family or your own culture. So that's what I wanted to share with you. I think it's time to move into questions and answers. So I'm curious, does anyone have any questions or comments about what I shared today?
Yeah, and if you have questions, you can unmute yourself, or you can put it in the chat, and maybe while people are thinking of their question, I'll maybe start with a question. And that is, first of all, thank you very much. I mean, I wish I had heard this talk 30 years ago. Because so much of school, rightly so, spends it on, the technical aspect, and obviously the technical aspect is, extremely important. But to really to lead and to become a leader, it's these types of things are so important. To listen to things like that. So my question is, some people might feel like they're not a natural leader. I love your story that you're a natural leader. You're up there, as a kid, leading the class. For people who are not natural leaders, you've given them a lot of tools. Do you think they can ever become at the same level as a natural leader?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So I gave some tools. And so the one thing I'll say is that leadership looks different ways. So I was at a workshop last year, and for many people, when we think about leadership, we think about the person who's on the front lines, who's in the meetings, who's always sharing and talking and leading in that way. And we talked about how there are different leadership styles, and some people lead in different ways. You have other people who are maybe a little bit more reserved, who are the ones who, after the meeting, they gather a group of people together, or they may poll people individually, and they come up with an idea, and then they may share it privately with the manager, and the next thing you know, you're hearing about this great idea. So we lead in different ways. I believe that most of us are natural leaders. I just think that it looks differently. So yes, I believe that anyone can become a successful, impactful leader. And I would encourage you to think about, again, that reflection, think about how you lead, what's comfortable for you. And then think about, remember we talked about what you need to improve, what are, right? If you need to improve your confidence or your ability to, say, speak in front of a group, then take a class and learn how to speak in front of a group. This is all an evolutionary process, and I have too, different things that I had to learn about how to tweak my natural communication style, my natural relating style with people. So yes, you can get there.
Great.
I have a quick question. First of all, thank you so much for the talk. I feel like I learned so much in just the past 40 minutes, but I feel like during quarantine, people have had a lot of time to self-reflect. So how would you say that we can adapt what we've been learning during this time, that there's been no other time like this, into our everyday lives when things are back to normal?
So the question is, how do you take this time and then like continue some of these things once you get back into normal?
Yes.
So this is a really good question. Um, so keep in mind that you may not always be able to do everything, right? So I'm a yoga teacher, one of the things that I do. And a lot of times when I would go to other people's yoga classes, or I just hear people in general saying things like, you know, you have to get in an hour of yoga a day. You have to get in, you know, 45 minutes of meditation a day. You have to eat this way, right? All these things. And what I have learned is that you have to prioritize, right? And if I know that I'm working 10 hours a day for work because I'm working on a project and I'm a mother, right? And I have responsibilities, that hour on the yoga mat and 45 minutes of meditation just may not happen. So the question really becomes, how do we include enough of what we need and incorporate that into our schedule? Right? In some cases, it may just be a direct, just instead of doing this thing, instead of watching TV or being online for an hour, you cut that back to 30 minutes and maybe you can meditate for 30 minutes. In some cases, you know, so that's about prioritizing. And I think once you think about what's important, I think you'll find ways to do that, right? For me, if I know I can't meditate every day, I'll do something easy, like every Saturday or at some point during the weekend, I want to make sure that I just take 20 minutes for myself just to unwind and have nothing to do, right? And so sometimes that helps.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a private chat question,
Okay.
and that is, you talked about finding a company that aligns with your values. How do you find that company?
That's a really good question. So there are a few ways. One, do research. So go online, go to their website, look at what those companies are saying they do. Most companies on their website will actually have a page that has their About Us page, will talk about their mission, their values, what they stand for. And then you may also see some other things on their pages. Try to look to see if their actions actually align with what they say they want to do. Some companies will actually have information about, say, community service or other initiatives that they're involved in on their website. If you Google the company and you put in, you know, Google the company news, right, then you'll start to see articles about the company that may talk about some of their initiatives and what they're doing. But the other way that I would really stress to you would be to use your network, right? So this is where LinkedIn comes in. This is where your network comes in. Talk to people and ask them, I'm interested in working for this company. What's your experience there? I see that this company says that their mission is to do these 3 things. Do you see that the company is actually doing that? And I think that, you know, be strategic. You know, you'll have people in your network that you'll start to see when you build your network that either work for that company or know someone who does. They'd be more than happy to help and answer that question. People in human resources in these departments, particularly, you know, on LinkedIn, send them a message and ask them. If you're very specific about, I saw on your website that you say you do these things, can you give me some examples of how you do that? That's a really good way to figure out how that company operates.
Great. Any other questions?
I have a question. So first of all, thank you for your time. I definitely learned a lot today. I just had a question about like people who are naturally shy or more reserved. Like, what advice do you have for those people to help improve their leadership skills?
Yeah, so the first thing I would say is to first thing I would say is to honor yourself where you are, right? And what we call shy, maybe we think of it in a different way, right? Maybe it's about how we choose to communicate, right? We have some people who are introverts and some people who are extroverts. And you guys will probably be shocked to hear this. I'm actually an introvert. I'm expressive, right? I don't have a hard time talking to people, but I also am not the person who walks into the room and, you know, you see these movies and TV shows where people come in and they like work the room. I'm not one of those people necessarily. So what I recognize about myself is that I have to have a certain amount of time for myself, right? And so I would think about, if you're shy, think about what that actually means, right? How can you redefine that word? What does being shy actually mean, right? Does it mean you prefer one-on-one discussions with people? Does it mean that sometimes you are a little bit more hesitant to talk to someone you may not know or introduce yourself to someone you may not know? And then once you identify that, I would find ways to improve the specific skills, right? The other thing I would share with you is to get a mentor. Get a mentor, someone who can just help to guide you a little bit. I've mentored women over the years, and what I find is that when we set a specific goal to improve, I want to improve my communication skills in this particular area, then it becomes easy to be focused on that thing and then just to work on that and then let the rest of it unfold. I want to really stress here, you know, I'm glad I brought it up earlier, is that there are different types of leaders. And it's not just the people who are always the loudest and the ones that are out in front. Wisdom traditions would teach us that you really need to look to the people who are maybe more reserved and more quiet, because there is this inner wisdom that often exists there. And we're just trying to figure out the right way to channel that information so that it can get to the right place. That's a great question. Thanks for having the courage to ask it.
Thank you.
Great.
I have a question about,
Go ahead. We'll make this the last question. I want to be sensitive to time, so go ahead.
oh, okay. No, just because you mentioned like finding a mentor, but how do you naturally find one and not just force it?
Mm-hmm. Build your network. Build your network. So there are a couple of different ways. One is to build your network. When you have a network of people, then you can ask within that network, I'm looking for a mentor to help me with whatever this thing is. And then people a lot of times will say, I think you should talk with this person or talk with that person. So be specific about what you want a mentor to help you to do. What are you trying to improve? What do you want to work on? Be very specific about that. And then I'm going to say use your network. Think about the people you know, and then figure out who can help you. Who are the people that are skilled in that area that can actually help you maneuver and navigate that particular area. You are in organizations. If you're in organizations in school, I hope you are, that you're active. Go to the leaders of those organizations, the sponsors of those organizations, and let them know, I'm trying to improve this particular skill. How can you help me? How can I find a mentor to help me with this? There are also some mentoring organizations that exist. Some of them are kind of mentors at large, and some of them work specifically with certain companies. So I'd encourage you to just do a Google search and find out what mentoring programs exist. Again, be specific about what it is that you're trying to improve. But when I say your network, really use your network. Use the organizations you're in, the people that you know, ask the questions, right? So I'm expecting you to network with me on LinkedIn and to ask a question. I'm trying to improve this. How do you think I can do that?
Yeah. So first of all, thanks everyone for the great questions, and Eboni, thank you so much for that. That was really helpful. Like I said, I wish I had heard this 30 years ago. And like you said, build your network before you need it. So, you know, Ebony's given you a great invitation to each of you to Lincoln with her. And so now is the time to do it, because I'm glad when I met her and saw her and she gave that great talk. And I said, I got to meet that lady sometime. You know, I'm glad that I went and did it, and I said paid off as far as, you know, it's been a great session for the students. I really, really appreciate you taking the time to do it. So everyone, little yays for yay for Ebony. So
Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
okay.
I love this. So thank you. And I wish you all the best of luck. Enjoy the rest of this summer and the rest of the sessions.
Thank you.
Thank
Everyone
you
have a good
so
day.
much.